And we're live. So
Yay.
welcome to Your Onion.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here.
So who have we got as a guest today?
we have the superstar.
Can you do your intro that you've been giving to the rest of the crew for the last couple of weeks? Because you've been very excited.
Oh my, no. So if
Come
you...
on, don't get embarrassed.
No, this is Scott Warren. And he, you know, I am so happy because Scott is like the wizard. You are.
Without the hat?
The wizard
the
without
beard.
the hat.
Or the
beard,
the white
or
hair.
the cape.
Yeah, so when's
you just said
when's the wizard
super
start?
wizard. No, you are in law. But also what I was amused and what do you say in English? Like
Captivated?
Captivated
Mm-hmm.
is what you're going to talk about on Wednesday.
Ooh. What?
Here in Qatar about cybersecurity.
Yes.
And that is cool. And something that is very important.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So yeah, it wasn't the best intro.
So Scott, would you like to introduce yourself so
I think
then
it's
we
better.
can get a clear idea?
I'm Scott Warren. I'm with a law firm called Squire Patton Boggs, and I'm actually based in Tokyo, but I spent a lot of time increasingly over the last 4 years here in Qatar, especially talking about cybersecurity and data privacy. Qatar is the first Middle Eastern country with its own data privacy law, and also is very much engaged in what happens when cybersecurity goes wrong, the embargo and other things related to that. So it's a very switched on country for thinking about cybersecurity, and I've really enjoyed being able to come back.
Great. And congratulations, you're our first lawyer to be on the podcast. Because
Congratulations.
every other lawyer says, no. I don't need to.
Is there a medal or a
Yes,
a
we're
trophy?
going to give you one. A
Absolutely.
trophy
Fantastic.
and
Yeah.
a medal
Awesome.
and also a dance.
Oh,
Yes.
a dance.
The law dance.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Scott, I'm curious, why did you get into law in the first place? What was the driving force?
So I was a musician in high school, playing in bands. I was thinking about possibly going into music. I play the trombone, so life, as a trombonist, you have to be incredibly good to make a living. Plus, at that time, MIDIs were coming on, and we were all sure at that time that MIDIs, were going to replace all the brass instruments. They would just press a keyboard, and there wouldn't be any brass players coming up. So I started looking for other things related to music that I could do. And I always noticed that the people that were really great musicians were usually not great at business. And so I thought maybe I can work with musicians in a business setting to help them, make money out of what they do. And so I decided to go to law school, and I went in Los Angeles, with the purpose of studying entertainment law and getting into intellectual property law. And so that was kind of the driving force that got me towards
That is
towards
so
doing
cool.
that.
That is a great story.
That is a great story.
But a trombone, how did you, anything, trombone, is it cool? Guitar, keyboard,
It's
singing?
funny, you see people doing air guitar and air drums, even air keyboards.
Yeah, trombone.
You never see an air trombonist, right?
Well,
Nobody's
I
like
never
going, oh man, that's a great riff.
Have you? Yeah, if you were impersonating a big band or something like that. But
I do it in the car when we go driving. I like doing the different...
Oh,
That's
yeah.
dangerous. 2 hands on the road, please.
Well, I
no,
don't
I'm
drive.
generally driving,
okay.
and she's the entertaining all the traffic with your whistle.
Yes,
You got a special whistle.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But
why the trombone?
I was trying to pick instruments back. In 4th grade back in the U.S. at that time, you kind of could have a chance to pick a brass or wind instrument, and I picked the trombone, and I still play it today. I'm in a band in Tokyo, 2 bands, and
Wow.
so
Is that kind of a big band style, or is
I
it?
started with a Tokyo big band. It's interesting in Tokyo. You're allowed to have one hobby in your life as long as it's the second most important thing in your life after work.
Yeah.
And so there are actually more, sommeliers, more salsa dancing clubs. There's more amateur jazz big bands in Tokyo than any other city in the world.
Wow.
So I was with a band for several years, and then moved to the current band that I'm in, which is 9-piece, but primarily, brass and woodwinds, and we're doing, and then also rhythm section and vocals. So we do everything from jazz to funk. Is that junk then? I don't know. But and then also we do a lot of groove type music. So Bobby Caldwell or
And are
Chicago
there specific venues for big band? You know?
So this wouldn't be a big band. This would be kind of
Okay.
this is a 9-piece
Right.
type band. So we'll do Tower of Power, and there are lots of places
Yeah.
they call them live houses there
Oh, wow.
that you can go play.
And can we find you on like Spotify?
Can we find you
or
on
You
the
can
YouTube?
find me on. We have YouTube out that we just put out. So
Really?
Okay, so we
That
can
is
put
so-
some links on.
Yeah, we
want
put some
to.
links.
Absolutely.
So cool.
So, and if any of your listeners happen to be in Tokyo, November 21st is our next gig. So,
Right.
Ah,
so
Superb.
good.
So, how did you end up going to Japan? Let's skip a little bit.
Sure.
And, how did you end up going there?
So I was an attorney in Los Angeles in, well, I won't give you the dates. It was a long, long, long time ago. And I met my wife there, who's half Japanese.
Okay.
And she had grown up most of her life in Japan, but was, back in Los Angeles doing physical therapy. And we met and decided maybe we could just make a jump and move to Tokyo and give it a shot. So that was 27 years ago.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you met your wife, were you into Japanese, talking Japanese, or is that a language that you've learned?
It's a language that I continue to learn. I usually say I know enough Japanese to get into trouble and not enough to get out of trouble, which isn't a bad mix, I guess, if you have to have something, right? No, I wasn't really studying it too much. I think my closest relation with Japan before that was I had a good friend in junior high, and I did one of my 6th grade reports on Commodore Perry, right? And that was about it. So
Wow. So you made the big jump,
yes.
and did you move to a firm?
No, I actually
did
went
you-
in-house, and I worked with Sega Games for about 13 years. Sorry, about 7 years. And then, at there I was doing everything from intellectual property licensing. We were opening up a lot of Sega amusement centers and theme parks through Southeast Asia. In fact, opened one in Dubai, which still is open.
Actually, my family have been there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of my licensing work to begin with. So,
Yeah.
And then did that all over, plus a lot of the anti-counterfeiting work. We did lots of raids on counterfeit products throughout Southeast Asia and Middle East, and even in Paraguay. Actually, I remember
Wow.
I was doing a raid in Dubai on some counterfeit products in.
Hold on. When you say you're doing a raid, are you actually?
Yeah, we would go and
Involved.
coordinate with the local
Oh,
lawyers,
really?
and let's see, the raid was actually going to be in Sharjah. And so we were meeting with our lawyer in Dubai and coordinating with the police and when we would go on the raid. And it was supposed to be in 2 days. So I met with the attorney and he said, yes, we're going to be doing the raid, inshallah. And I said, excuse me, it's in Sharjah. He says, yes, inshallah. He says, no, in Sharjah. And I realized I wasn't very astute yet.
And how did that raid go?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. We see some products. So, yeah.
Wow. So Sega, you were there
Sega, and then I moved over to Microsoft to do the Xbox launch for Asia. And
Wow, these aren't small names, are they?
It's
it was
not
fun work.
super tiny.
It was fun work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Lots of stuff there. Lots of anti-counterfeiting with that, as well as other products. And then actually, I started doing more and more with cybersecurity around 2003, 4, when.
Was that when cybersecurity was starting to?
It was really picking up.
Yeah.
There had been some big Microsoft zero-day viruses. That means a virus that's never seen before that hits. So Slammer was one of them, and that had hit. And I think, essentially, Bill Gates wakes up one morning and says, if every single time some of our people are getting their identities hacked, their names are stolen, their children are propositioned, their credit cards stolen, nobody's going to buy an operating system. So we dedicated some of the senior resources to work with police, with governments and others to try to work a little bit more on how do we stop hackers and do a better job with that. So I've been working on since about 2004.
So has your role become more technical? Did you have to?
I had, throughout all of my work, it's really been the intersection between law and technology. It's funny, even back in when I was going to law school, I convinced my dad to give me a loan for $5,000 to buy a desktop, which was about half the size of this.
Oh, I can imagine.
This table. It had dual floppies. There was no hard
Yeah.
drive. And then a dot matrix printer, so I could type my stuff up. So my briefs from law school and stuff. So I was really involved with technology and interested in it and doing some minor programming things, but nothing really significant. But increasingly, especially as I was doing the anti-counterfeiting work, you'd have to convince a Philippine or Indonesian judge that a digital copy of a piece of work is illegal under the Copyright Act. And that would then lead into dealing with people with mod chips, and those were things that defeat security systems. So is that something that is illegal under the Copyright Act? So, and increasingly, you just start working more and more with the technical folks, even trying to build into the security system things that'll help you legally protect the platform later. So, for example, in the control pads, when Microsoft first released the Xbox, they were trying to do something more like the PlayStation and get rid of the Sony name and just go with PlayStation, and Xbox was going to be the name, and they didn't really want to go with Microsoft. But the problem in places like India is it takes about 7 years to get your trademark registered.
Oh, really?
So if there was counterfeiting in India, then there was no way for us to take action against it. And so I, worked with them to get the Microsoft name kind of burned into the control pad casing, so that you could actually see it or feel it, but not really notice it. But it worked, and allowed us to take actions wherever we needed to. So increasingly was working with technology side, and then certainly on the cyber side, in order to try to figure out what they would do and how they were hacking, then work with police and others to drive cases. You had to kind of dig into it, and that's been fascinating.
Well, absolutely. Not a boring job then.
No, good stuff.
And you're very good with the gaming.
Yeah, are you any good at gaming?
No, not anymore. It's I used to be pretty good back on the arcade Daytona 500, but that's so dated now that it probably isn't count anymore.
Did you watch Stranger Things, where you saw the whole old arcades and?
No. Oh. Is it good?
Yeah.
It's
Netflix?
Netflix.
Set in the 80s. Yeah. With the kids going to their gaming centres and. Yeah, very retro.
Stranger Things. I'll
Stranger
put it
Things.
on my list.
But when I was in the UK here a couple of weeks ago, because we don't have arcades in Sweden, and they
do you know?
No,
prohibited?
We don't really have the arcades thing.
Wow.
No, so
Never
I was
realised.
like, wow, it was so fun. So we were just like.
She did go down to the coast, so they're full of arcades.
It was so cool. It was like being in a film. It was really cool.
Great.
So, is there times when you're frustrated because the law is behind the way technology is changing and security and?
It's always a challenge with the law. It's one of the reasons why I like intellectual property side of the law is that it's constantly changing. Real property law, who owns this piece of land, really hasn't changed in hundreds, if not thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
It's something you can trace back. But intellectual property law changes with the computer being formed. And so the issue with the mod chip starts being, well, the mod chip doesn't really steal the actual code, but it enables the code to work. And so then you have a counterfeit running on the RAM memory of a computer, the chip itself, right? And then your question is, well, it's running in that, it enables that. So is that the violation? You never have that question before.
Yeah.
And then the internet comes in and we start talking about, well, is our downloads illegal? And, that got into all those different music and movie cases. And now we have streaming media. And so it becomes always changing. And there's really no way for the law to completely keep up. I think one of the challenges that we sometimes do with the law is we try to say, well, we need a whole new set of rules. But in reality, you can use all sorts of old examples and not get too complicated, and still be able to find protection by just thinking, what is this like? I had a case in Korea in the mid-2000s that involved hackers. But what had happened is we wanted to get all sorts of industry together to talk about the different hacks that were going on, try to figure out which were the ones that were most important, and then involve the police and try to help them figure out which case. Because if I just went to the police and said, I'm Microsoft, I've got this case, they say, we're a little busy, but if I could bring 15 or 20 other sometimes local and sometimes foreign entities with one big case that was helpful.
Yeah.
So we'd start talking about the cases, and I went to a government agency that in Korea kind of looks over the different parts of the business, that look over the internet and try to protect it. And they said, you can't sit in a room and talk about these cases. And we're like, why? It says, well, are you sharing IP addresses, the place where these things come from on the IP? And we're like, yes, absolutely, because that's the way we can figure out who's the big targets. And they said, well, that's personal information. You can't share that with you in a room. And we're like, well, that's like saying a white Cadillac drives through a neighborhood, shoots up the neighborhood, and two neighbors can't say, did you see the white Cadillac with license plate number 55573?
Absolutely.
Right? We would never say that in the real world, but sometimes we switch and we don't really think like that in the digital world. And that's really the challenge. I think we've got the law now 10 years, 15 years behind technology, which has allowed a lot of great things to happen by letting data to move between different countries at the speed of a second, and data clouds and other things, enabling big business to figure out, well, how do I market this, or what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And the laws suddenly coming in and saying, well, you really can't do that with our data. So here's the example. I was with Microsoft. We had all of our Hotmail servers sitting in Sunnyvale, California at the time. They didn't have any other servers. Those were the ones. And any of the data on, if the police from the U.S. or Qatar or somebody else came to us and says, we want this particular data, we'd say under U.S. rules, this is what we apply and this is how we give it to you.
Yeah.
And now we've got EU GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. You've got the United States with their rules, and Qatar with theirs. And so now we're saying we don't care, we don't care whose data it is, but we care, where the data sits. If your data is on our servers, then please apply our laws.
Yeah.
And that means it's really, I think, complicated for companies to figure out, okay, whose laws do I apply when I move data across borders?
Wow.
Wow.
How do you keep on top of it all?
I don't know.
How do you keep it fresh?
I think the best way is you think about examples or things that actually happen. And then, again, you look kind of perspective, historically what's happened, and that helps. So in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, one of the big hacks was these things called botnets, and it was something where people were doing denial of service attacks, which means they'd go to your website and ping it so many times, ask so many questions that the website would go down.
Right.
And it got to be that ISPs and others that were handling those, could move those around and change addresses and other things in order to thwart that. And then that kind of died out for a bit, and then it's suddenly come back because we have these IoT devices, which are anything from your server, at home, your router, to your light bulbs that you control with your application on your phone. And those, some of the hackers have figured out how to make them a device that pings a certain website.
Wow.
And then you have a terabyte per second hitting the eastern seaboard of the U.S. and kind of almost taking down the entire internet for a period of time. So it's cyclical, but the approach sometimes can change and be different. And I think you have to kind of look at what's going on, and that just makes it keep fresh for for the next steps.
Wow. Unbelievable. And, okay, moving on. How do countries, protect their systems these days? Is it through technology, through, specific laws? Like, for instance, when you first introduced yourself, the whole blockade situation where it was caused by a hack. How do countries get around that? How do they protect themselves?
So this is the problem with crime, right? You can have a house and then realize you need locks on the house, and then you realize that you need locks on the windows, and then you realize maybe you need bars on the windows, and then you realize that maybe you need a security system, and then you think, well, maybe there's a video system that can help me watch, and then you decide to just take all your valuables and keep them in a bank.
Yeah.
And then the bank gets targeted. So the criminals will always try to find different ways. And I don't think any government has figured out yet how exactly to completely eradicate it. That'll always be a bit of a cat and mouse. Indeed, the U.S., back 3-4 years ago completely reevaluated how they were handling things because hackers were hitting so many different U.S. departments that never shared information between themselves, but the hackers were getting information from all different departments, and they realized they needed to communicate much better through all the different ministries when these hacks occurred and also get to a certain base level.
So have we seen through hacking that communications between countries and departments has improved
I'd say it's improved on a country basis, depending on where the country is. It's improved and become more focused. It is a bit of a challenge doing it between countries, especially on a legal case. On like a police investigation, because the traditional way of getting cross-border investigations done is to do something called an MLAT, Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, and it can take you 6 months in order to get the paperwork done. And if you can imagine in a internet ransomware bank fraud case, that money is moving from bank to bank and country to country within milliseconds, or at least as fast as they can get the money out of banks. So there are some mechanisms to try to fix that. I'm on a board called PolCyb. It's the Society for Policing of Cyberspace, and it's a nonprofit organization designed to bring police and governments and prosecutors and corporations together and to talk about these things. And one of the things that you can do with that organization is if you get 100 police in the room, they and maybe some lubricant of some sort to get them happy or talking or whatever, but they'll automatically kind of gel together and start focusing on cases. And they forget the national lines. And that's kind of the unique thing about, I think, cops worldwide is they generally want to find the bad people. And
absolutely.
so they forget about, this is my enemy from yesterday. This is my friend from today. And so you can oftentimes get those relationships where they can maybe not have to go through an MLAT, but call somebody and say, can you help me investigate this case on your side of the water? You do that, and then we'll kind of meet up in the middle at some point once we've got all the other paperwork. And that's a practical solution that I think it's really important.
Well, we're running out of time, so come on.
Before, I need to so what kind of recommendation or what do you do yourself for protect your cybersecurity? Do you have any good tips, recommendations from the coach? So
for an individual standpoint versus company, I think this is the hardest. It's hard for me as well, but everybody has probably their one or two go-to passwords, and their username, It's amazing that a lot of the hacks that are out now are basically just taking lists of known usernames and passwords that have been gotten from other sites and applying them. They had one in Japan. It was the 7-Eleven in Japan, kind of retail. Do they have them here?
Yeah.
Anyway,
not
here, but
yes.
Family Mart or I don't know,
Yeah.
some type of convenience store, right?
Yeah.
And they decided to open up a mobile pay so that you could go in with your phone and pay with your phone. And they used one-factor authentication instead of two, which means it's just username and password as opposed to then maybe getting a call from the app and a special security number or some other way to confirm. And they found that within 3 days, lots of their people were getting hacked and the money was being taken out. And that was because there was a straight use of the hackers taking somebody's username and password that they've used in another account and them applying it to this one. Somewhat that's the corporation's fault, 7-Eleven's fault for doing that. And somewhat it's people's fault too. I mean, we need to realize that, and this has also happened with companies, right? People will use their same username and password at work for something online at a shopping network that gets broken, and then the hackers will use that by looking at your Facebook and finding out where you work to see if they can get into the corporate network. And that's been common even here in Qatar.
Yeah, I've been hacked twice. I'm hacked now as well in my Facebook. Yeah.
Hack or stalked?
I don't
You're so popular. Everyone wants to target you.
I'm hacked again, so I don't have a Facebook now. They shut it down. So weird.
Wow.
Well, I don't know.
It's hard though because passwords are something that you need to remember, right? I know, and I think like Apple has the option that you can use your fingerprint and they'll create some crazy password for you. But what do you want to do if you want to go on in your laptop at home or at work onto a website that you use?
Absolutely.
So it is a challenge, I think, but it is really important that you have different passwords, that you do change them.
You need to.
Yeah, but I do.
I know, but come up with something.
Stefan.
Yeah, use his name and password. That'll throw him off.
Yeah.
Stefan is
I think one other thing is that you need to realize that what you're doing when you go on an open Wi-Fi, like you're at, I don't know, Starbucks, coffee shop or something like that, and there's a Wi-Fi available, those open Wi-Fis are visible to people. They can see most of the stuff that's over that. So you use a VPN, virtual private network, oftentimes if you're going to do anything sensitive that you don't want other people to know. But again, it also depends on the hackers and how serious they want to get. The hack of the Pyeongchang Olympics in Korea for the Winter Olympics this last time, it was attributed to Russians who are still upset about not being able to participate in the Olympics because of the anti-doping scandal. Right, the doping says that you can't participate. So, and they've tried to make it look like a North Korean hack by using North Korean tools. Again, this is attributed to several sources, so I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying a lot of people that I think are accurate are probably true. At any rate, but the sophisticated level of that hack, they were working months before at the hotels where the Olympic organizing committee was at, and very much focused on that. And I just read. Very similar, if not same, hacks were happening at the recent IAAF World Championship. That there was, a focused attempt to get into and take and had some impact, although there was no discussion about what exactly happened. So as you go towards World Cup,
that's going to be interesting.
There is a funny link between Japan and Qatar that way, because Japan just did the Rugby World Cup. And then next year, we're going to have the 2020 Olympics. And so both in somewhat island nations, if you will, surrounded by a lot of countries that may have some political issues with them. For Japan, North Korea, China, Russia, depending on whether the Russians participate. And, of course, Qatar with its own circle of interesting, countries. So both of them are kind of trying to figure out how do we quickly get up to cybersecurity in a way that allows, people to have a great time when they come and not be disrupted from the bad stuff.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Scott. We've run out of time.
Oh, yes. Shall we do another one?
No,
Thank you, Scott. Okay.
I'm sorry, I think I talked too much.
We can invite in 6 months' time.
Yes, 6 months. Next time we
Well,
come.
we thought of some more questions.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Scott,
Thank
for
you,
being on the
Scott.
show.
Good.
And
Wish
it's
you
been
best.
fascinating, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And wow. And you know where to go if you've got any.
I'm gonna.
problems.
You have a new client here.
Great.
She won't let
Help
you go.
me with my Facebook. No, just joking.
If you're interested in our band, I can give you a YouTube link, and you can take a
superb.
listen to it.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
we
need
shared
to.
that, absolutely.
The trombone.
All right,
So
let's
good.
finish up. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you, guys. Thank you for watching. Take care. And don't forget all our other podcasts, Stow Our Heat, In the Game, Your Onion, and The Happy Munchies.
Munchies.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.